Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be in the world listening to this podcast. It's the Runner Football Podcast, the second edition of the first week of June, as we now have a couple of stories in the cycle to maybe just, reflect upon and see where we stand as far as South African football is concerned. My panel tonight is made up of Veli Limnyandu. I've got the Super Journal Mazola Molefe on the line alongside John T. Mark to discuss some of the big breaking stories. And this one, whilst might be a big story, many have seen coming for a while, and that is Absa deciding to part ways with the league as far as their sponsorship is concerned. Velile, not a big surprise, this one, is it?
No, I think we've been expecting that come end of the season, there's going to be something like this. Because you will recall, I think, it was earlier this year or late last year when there was a story that Absa, this marriage is finally going to come to an end. And look, if I remember very well, Absa came into the picture to sponsor the league in 2007. They had been sponsoring the Absa Cup before then. And when you look at it, the period of Absa coming in, it coincided with the arrival of the new TV deal through SuperSport, and this was also talking more to the transformation of the league in terms of the manuals, which the league was also looking at introducing, and introduced successfully, and then so Absa will always be aligned to that brand, which also helped to bring professionalism to the PSL. So they've always been together, and even going to the 2010 World Cup when all eyes were in South Africa, Absa has always been there, and also, coming with a 10 million rand first prize, and that was their big pay line at the time, and even this season they increased it to 15 million rand.
Right.
So I think there are some more good things which you can align to Absa and the PSL, especially this Absa Premiership sponsorship. I've been seeing a lot of people saying it's going to take some time to separate Absa Premiership and the PSL. But look, it used to be Castle Premier League for a very long time.
Right.
So
people will change, yeah.
Yes. That's why I was saying earlier today when we finally got the official news, was to say, times change, models come and go, and even now, the PSL will come and they'll come maybe with a different model. I'm just not sure, if for Absa, if this is really something that they really wanted. Besides the fact that, look, it's also difficult times for everyone, financially, and this COVID-19 is not making things easier. It's going to be worse now. But this is a decision which was always going to be taken. But I'm interested to see, because I had heard that because I think Absa has got a new boss, a new CEO, and he seemed to be pro-football. So sometimes you wonder if when was this decision taken?
Yes.
And when they took the decision, was it a case of when they decided maybe that, hey, we're not really sure we want to come back, maybe the league had already moved in terms of making other plans. Hence now we're talking about them possibly remaining within the footballing sector,
right?
Maybe within PSL, and maybe sponsoring another cup competition. I don't know.
Yeah.
So because once you're in this space, I don't think it's a space which you want to move out of it entirely.
Sure. You've put some skin in the game already, so you might as well.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. But look, I think one of the things we have to know then Now, in terms of sponsorship, the biggest drivers now when it comes to the revenue of especially the league is TV money.
Yes. Right. It is. I mean, of course, that SuperSport deal is pretty much what's keeping everything alive at the moment, Mazola. I mean, that then comes into focus with the fact that the value proposition for the league when looking for a new sponsor now is to say, okay, cool, here is this product. Yeah, only a portion of the population is able to watch it because it's behind a supposed paywall. How much harder is that going to make finding a new sponsor, or is it just about finding a sponsor who speaks to people who can afford to watch DSTV? How do you then balance the requirements for that funding and that money in the game with what probably will be on the requirements for a sponsor saying, listen, I want access to the maximum amount of people via your platform, it being the soccer league?
Kamza, I don't think it's going to be that hard. I'll be honest. I think the Premier Soccer League is well placed to have networks and connections in just about every sort of commercial industry, if I can put it like that. And yes, I mean, you might find a case where, obviously Absa leaving, and there's also been talk of Telkom potentially pulling out as well, and maybe that opens the door for Absa to come in as a cup competition.
Yeah.
But I think as Velile mentioned earlier, that this Absa Premiership sponsorship helped to professionalize the league as well. I mean, as we were saying earlier, 140 million a season, or 136 as per last year's financial statement. Just shows just how much of an important aspect, especially in terms of revenue, this partnership was. So to be letting it go, and also, I mean, if like Velile was saying, we've known about this since maybe about December, January,
right.
Recently, and it didn't come as a shock. Yes, when it's confirmed, it sounds like oh what a travesty, whatever. But it's been coming, and I suspect the chairman of the league and executive committee, have probably been planning to bring about a new sponsorship. Although they were still kind of engaging with Absa to say, can you take up? Because my understanding is that the agreement was a 5-year contract, but it was split in 3 years plus a 2 added option, and therefore Absa did not exercise that 2-year option. So I think, having been in these discussions for some time, they would have known that, especially when COVID hit, that the likelihood of Absa staying on, are minimal, and they would have started hitting the ground running to sort of advertise the league as an an entity that a lot of these commercial companies can partner in. I mean, you might be surprised at who would actually come in or be interested. I mean, football obviously is the biggest sport in the country, and if you have other sporting codes that play second fiddle, yes, they've all had their financial woes and financial concerns, but if football trumps all of them, I don't really see the league struggling. They may struggle for time in terms of doing it for the upcoming season, the 2021 season. But I think in the long run, probably not. I think they may do a deal where they have a title sponsor just for this upcoming season, and then plan something long term for the 2021-2022 season and going forward. So, look, I don't think it's going to be that difficult, but I guess we will all also know in the coming days, because if there's no revenue coming in, so it speaks to the collapse of the league. But look, SuperSport have taken care of that, about 800 million a season. That takes care of a lot of things. So I think they can probably do without the money from Absa for a season, and take a temporary title sponsor while looking for something concrete that could potentially bring even more than what Absa were putting on the table.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, Jonty, that makes a good point in it being temporary because of the current landscape financially and economically. Any company that kind of jumps on has to almost have its own house in order as far as, its workforce, its economies of scale in terms of having, no retrenchments going on, because this is the nature of the beast at the moment. A lot of companies are closing doors, having to trim things down, and that might then have a knock-on effect on the size of a deal that can be done to support the league.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's a difficult situation at the moment with what's going on. As a product, the PSL is quite a lucrative product, or is quite an attractive product for potential sponsors. I mean, I do think in the sense that if they can get it up and running again, the PSL is not a league that necessarily relies on, for example, gate receipts. So if they're filming games behind closed doors, it's not necessarily a problem for the Premier League. That won't necessarily not attract a sponsor going forward if next season that needs to happen, because obviously Absa are sponsoring now to the end of the 2019-20 season. I did speak to Ntunzi Jonas today, the head of sponsorship for Absa, and he did confirm that it was a 3-year deal with an option to renew, as Mazzola said, for another 2. So they've obviously decided not to take that up.
Did he kind of intimate as to why? Did he give you any inkling?
Well, basically, it's it's an economic thing. I think they were keen to obviously stress what Absa have done for football, and then they were stressed that it's a 16-year relationship, so it's a long relationship in sponsorship terms.
Yeah.
But he did mention the economy, and he did mention the fact, but he also did stress the fact that the economy has been out of kilter or on the way down, if you like, since long before COVID. So I do think an executive decision was made at some level by Absa before COVID. Whether the decision was to keep going until 2022 and then pull out, I don't know. But now obviously they've taken and whether COVID-19 has precipitated a decision to pull out earlier, I guess that's a possibility. Because if they could have extended for another 2 years, they did have that option. And certainly the report that came out at the end of January from the Sunday World, I think it was, it said the PSL were going to dump, Absa were going to dump the PSL. That said only in 2022. So I don't know whether they've brought that decision forward because of the current crisis. It's just precipitated the decision. But I do think for a potential sponsor, the Premiership is certainly still a lucrative possibility. And I don't think it will stop them finding a sponsor, even if in the short term it's a temporary one, but I think they will get a long-term sponsor, provided they can obviously get the game up and running as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Gents, let's move on in terms of looking at the story that we've kind of been watching this whole time as to the BOG at the PSL meeting to kind of fashion a way forward. Stavej, as it currently stands, I know apparently there was a meeting today. What's the latest in terms of, South and the PSL, and of course, just any murmurings of what might happen moving forward?
Well, I think we're still expecting. The man who's been having his hand on the pulse for that one is right there in the middle.
He'll get his chance. I just thought that maybe your Rotos have had something else on the side. How you operate.
But I think what is clear is that our teams are going to go back to training very soon. And depending on how the negotiations will also go with government, our teams I also think football will be coming back next month. In terms of, because today's, I think one of the things that Monday's meeting couldn't succeed in doing was to come up with the resumption date.
Yes.
The JLC. So if you look at the agenda that the PSL all its 32 clubs had, because you see one of the things when we talk about the resumption of play, people tend to only talk about the 16 teams. It's not just about the 16 teams, it's about the 32 teams, you know? So if you're saying you are having a base camp, so you have to have two of those base camps. You have to have one for first division, you have to one for the Premier Division.
Right.
So, and also there are a lot of other things that they really need to work on, because if they are talking about finishing this season, then they have to be clear about when do they start again with the new season, you know, and also the registration processes. And remember, players' contracts which are coming to an end, and now everything is going to overlap, you know, beyond this season, you know. So and also I think for me that is also why they even came out and confirmed that the relationship with Absa is coming to an end, so that the new sponsor can start to do its branding, you know, for the next season. So, and also it, you know, so there are just a lot of things there. But I think the PSL will come out with some information, especially from today, on what transpired in the BOG meeting. And also, as you know, I mean, the BOG, that's where the decisions of the PSL are taken, because all the 32 clubs are there.
Right.
So I think we're going to have more clarity from today, and I think that's when also maybe they'll also be consulting their sponsors in the next few days going forward on how they plan to also wrap up the season, because remember, it's not just the Absa Premiership which needs to be wrapped up, it's also the Nedbank Cup.
Yes, and the Nedbank Cup. Mazola, just to bring you in on this one, clearly there's been a lot of confusion because people kind of heard the regulations, you know, at the weekend that, you know, training can resume. I just saw Julian busy saying that, you know, they had players arriving to do that only for it to be stopped, because apparently Natim Tetwa saying something doesn't mean that it's actually happening already. And so you've had this confusion as to when can we go back and start training. So what's going on? It just seems to be quite confused.
Yeah. I mean, you know, obviously when the minister was speaking on Saturday morning, you know, there were a lot of questions still lingering around, and follow-ups then would have shown that there's a lot of confusion, because I also read in the Sunday Times, which covered it extensively by speaking to various sports bodies, anything from football, cricket, rugby, and swimming and athletics, to ask if they think the minister made enough sense in his document, which then has to be published and gazetted for the clubs to then go ahead and follow the instructions on it. And it would seem that there were a lot of uncertainties with regards to what the minister was actually saying. And what I heard today as well, coming out of the BOG, is that football is also now classified as a medium contact sport, not medium contact sport, and full on contact sport would be rugby. A sport like rugby, where obviously, you know, the scrumming, and, you know, the tackling and all of that. So what that means. Exactly. What that means then, you know, it's maybe for the PSL to then perhaps go to the sports ministry and you know, explain their task team report with regarding COVID-19 regulations. And also what's come out of there is that perhaps the PSL as a sports body can approach the ministry on their own without necessarily collaborating with SAFA, but then that would contradict what the sports minister had said about SAFA and the PSL working together to speak with one voice. So I don't, even though that might have been the suggestion that's coming out after maybe the PSL and SAFA have read and studied the minister's draft, if they come to that conclusion, it's still a bit confusing, because then why would he have said the two have to align and speak with one voice and not present different sort of documents? And be that as it may, I think the job is already long done. I think the JLC has met and they've put together a comprehensive report. If the PSL can approach the ministry on their own, then that means that was a total waste of time. Then why sit together and formulate a task team, give it 2 weeks to report back when you could have just gone to the sports ministry or to the government on your own? So I think there's a bit of a contradiction there. But I think, as Velile is saying, we are going to have clarity soon, I believe. And I think now it's a matter of testing, because there were several clubs that were trying to get back onto the training pitch this week, but they were stopped dead in their tracks by the league and by SAFA to say, hang on, yes, the minister might have said athletes can train, but we still have to do rigorous testing. And then after a couple of days or weeks, then maybe we can move forward with regards to training and that. So as far as I know, Chipa United and Cape Town City had started training this week, but they've been told to stop their plans for training, and this will be revisited next week. I'm also probably again a little bit disappointed again that there's been a BOG meeting and we've had no statement. Perhaps that's also a sign that maybe there's not much to report on. Maybe it was a lot of discussions about what was on the agenda, but not necessarily no resolutions, if that makes sense, So maybe it will become clearer in the coming days, because remember, the agenda was quite extensive. I mean, you had on there, the binding agreements, player contracts, return of play. So, usually these BOG meetings usually last between 1 and 2 hours. And I think today's one probably went a bit over, maybe 3 to 4 hours, if I'm not mistaken. So, maybe, I was hoping we will get a document clarifying, but I guess we'll have to rely on our sources to DM us the documents like they've been doing over the last 2 months.
Right.
But I was surprised. There were teams which had decided to start training, because I felt that the minister was very clear on this one, that yes, this is what they are looking at, that non-contact sport and continue, but the federations still have 14 days to submit a plan. On
For me, that was clear. Velile,
That surprised me when they were tweeting about going back to training. I didn't understand. I was like, why are you going back to training when it's been quite clearly said by the sports minister that each federation or representative of the sport involved has 14 days to make a presentation to government on how they can go back. Exactly. But it's like teams were so desperate to get back to training that they were like, we've sanitized our training ground. Now we can. And
also, I think it's also important to understand that who is the federation here? PSL is not a federation, but PSL is a member of a federation. So SAFA should submit this on behalf of the PSL. So the clubs need to understand. Okay. And sometimes I feel that society also doesn't understand.
Yes. Okay, we're going to use this opportunity to say thank you to Mazola. You have real-world things that you have to go take care of. Thank you so much for your contribution and your time. We'll catch you on the next edition of the podcast. Have a good evening, sir.
Cool. Cheers, guys.
There we go. Gents, we're going to carry on the conversation, but just to draw on that point, though, I guess maybe the clubs, if I'm going to play devil's advocate here, if you're going to be testing and you're going to be making sure that your grounds are clean, your training center is clean, your changing room is clean, surely these afford an opportunity to kind of, get those things done before we're all caught flat-footed and then we have to do them. I mean, if you're going to test and if you're going to make sure that the players are healthy before you get into training, why not train? No one's saying that we're going to have full contact matches, but it does afford the authorities that then when they are ready to go, teams aren't trying to start up this machine because time would seem to be of the essence. Or is time not?
Yeah, I mean, I understand on some level that teams want to play, they want to train. I mean, I was even told that some teams have been training anyway.
Right.
I'm not going to get involved in that now.
I had that today.
But I do think though that there has to be an agreement and then teams have to go back to training. And I do think that the sports minister did make it clear that there's 14 days for the federation to present to government how they can go back. So I spoke to people who said to me, like, there seems to be some sort of difficulty over the exact implementation of this, because people are saying, like, if we have to test every player, who pays for the testing? Kind of. That's one of the things that was said. Okay. So I think all this stuff has to be ironed out by the PSL in terms of who's going to pay for what, how, the exact protocol to get back, and then teams can go back to training. But I do think it obviously, if they're intending to finish the season in July, which they are, it needs to happen ASAP.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, is that if you're training, you're allowing yourself to say, okay, cool, let's get a week in, another week. Okay, when they say, cool, we got to go, it's not a case of, oh, snap, here we go. We need 3 weeks to train. Before you know it, it's the end of July. I mean, Billy, I don't know. Am I not?
Yeah, I feel that for me, the ministry has already said within 14 days, I think out of the responses or the statements, one of the statements I liked as soon as the minister announced this past weekend was a response from cricket.
Yeah.
We were very clear to say we're meeting on Monday, and in this meeting, and then we'll be making plans on how they can resume training and under these conditions, and also that they are not forcing anyone, be it a player or a coach, to resume training. And they will also be saying they were talking to the South African Cricket Association around this as well. I feel that with football, there's still, this tussling.
Yeah, power dynamics at play.
Yes, and time is not on their side.
Yes.
Time is not on their side. They have to submit the plan, and then the plan must be approved, and then they can go back to training.
But here's the thing, though, is that even if you're given 2 weeks, Veli, you can't then say, okay, we've got 2 weeks. What have they been doing all this time? When Nati said that, when the minister said that on the weekend, they should have been Monday saying, well, we've been working on this. Here's this thing. Have a look. Why must we wait 2 weeks?
My understanding is that I don't think the league and its mother body, SAFA, are on the same page on this thing.
Right.
Because if they're on the same page, we should have had clear decisions on the next step,
yes. Yes.
From Monday. The fact that they still want to go back and consult the Ministry of Sport, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Transport, it tells you that these two bodies are not singing from the same hymn.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's been like that from the very beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. But now it's being exposed because if Rabi wants to respond to what the ministry is saying, they are very quick with that.
Yes.
And also, who's the professional entity between the two? It's PSL,
Yes.
And they are the ones who are suffering business-wise, And so this is the reality of the situation. But it's also not easy for SAFA as well, because there are referees who fall under SAFA, and they're not being paid currently, and they're paid per game, understand? So, and look, Kamza, even us as journalists,
yes.
This thing is also affecting us. Yes, I know that the issue of COVID-19 is very serious, and it should be. I mean,
it can't be taken lightly. I hear you. Yeah.
But also, if there are ways of professional sport going back, because I was saying yesterday on Ukhozi that professional sport is not just about the 22 players kicking the ball.
It's the ecosystem, the economic ecosystem, yes.
And because I'm sitting here, I've not been reporting like I'm used to report for the past 2 months,
Of course.
But I feel that if football was to come back, maybe my superiors things would change. Understand? Because economically it's affecting all of us.
Yeah.
And for me, if government is very much understanding and saying, no, you know what? And this is what the minister said this past weekend. We want you to resume training because we know with professional sport, you have to prepare so that there are no injuries when you start playing.
Yes.
But now the powers that be are delaying. It's not good. It's not
No,
good.
I think also Valida's got a good point there, because ultimately, if the Bundesliga, if it wasn't for finances, the Bundesliga would not have come back. If it wasn't for finances, the English Premier League would not be coming back. But the simple fact is that clubs in Germany could go out of business if they don't get to play. So they've made a decision that we know the risk, but we're going to play anyway. And that's ultimately what needs to happen in the PSL.
Yeah,
and they just need to say, we know the risks, but we need to, and SAFA need to back them up, because SAFA are the federation, the controlling body of football in this country. But like Valide says, there just seems to be this kind of permanent conflict between SAFA and the PSL that's not helpful for the progression of getting this over the line and up and running. Because ultimately, it's not a case of we can only go back when it's safe to play. It's a case of we have to go back because economically, this is no longer viable. And so we know there's a risk. We'll do everything we can to eliminate this risk, but we have to play football. It's the whole industry.
That's what I thought the mandate was this week, with guys saying, listen, we know the risks. We're going to take all the precautions. Let us get back to train. So once you people have figured out what's going on, we're ready to go, and no one's wasting time.
You know, we were on an interview with John D, I think on Sunday, with Sanzo. And Sanzo is the CEO of Simba SC in Tanzania. Tanzania is coming back into play. And most leagues on the continent which are commercially viable, like the PSL, they are coming back to play.
For sure.
For sure. And I know that, there's this talk that, because also here at home it's also winter, and also we are still going towards to get towards the peak of this pandemic. But the situation now is government is saying, go back and train.
Yes, we're going back towards the peak, and we're going towards colder weather, Velile. So, I mean,
exactly.
I don't understand what the delay is when you're saying that we're trying to do it in the best conditions. Surely now is the time, not a month from now.
Exactly. So I really don't understand what this thing is all about. And maybe one of the things I was also thinking, could it be a case of SAFA is also thinking that if the PSL is coming back to play, then there has to be relegation and promotion.
And playoffs. Don't forget playoffs. There's also that.
Yes, but I read something that they could do away with the playoffs, especially of relegation and promotion in the PSL. Okay. I'm not sure about it.
Okay.
But now, SAFA will also have to promote teams from the second division, the ABC Mutsi.
Yes.
So could it be a situation of they are thinking that they will not have the capacity? And remember, the second division playoffs are always not easy, because there's a lot of cases sometimes that have to,
that stretch longer than the football season. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And also they have to have the national playoffs to decide on the two teams that get promoted. Now,
are you telling me that SAFA, because it sounds like you're saying to me, SAFA would just prefer to kind of say, hey, man, let's kind of draw a line under the season and we'll start again next season?
No, but the way they've been delaying it, it tells you of, for me, it does sound like they want the easy way out. It does sound like they want the easy way out, because when you look at it now, they are the ones who've been more, as much as, look, they've got some health reasons, but now when the government, because remember, the final arbiter is government. Government is saying, go back and train, but they are...
Hey, time will tell, gents. Thank you. Let's see how it plays out. I just feel like time is running out, but hey, maybe all these people involved at the higher levels know something that we don't, and it'll all be clear in the next coming days. I hope that is the case, and then we'll have something to celebrate as South African football. John T. Mark, Velile Mnyandu, really thank you for your time. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Don't queue for alcohol.